Hey Beth, did you know all of your favorite podcasts, including Be There in 5, are on Amazon Music? We know finding the best listening platform can be a challenge, but Amazon Music does it right. They make the process seamless from start to finish. You can even listen on any Alexa-powered devices you have. All you have to say is, Alexa, don't want to trigger, play the podcast Be There in 5 on Amazon Music. Or if you're listening on your phone, just download the Amazon Music app and search Be There in 5 and click follow. Thanks for supporting Amazon Music and this show. Now on to the episode. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Be There in 5 podcast. I'm Kate Kennedy, your host. I'm so excited because, my favorite thing to do on the podcast is to talk to other podcasters, especially ones I've wanted to have on for a while when there's an overlap of interest, a shared interest with not only me, but with you guys. In this case, it is, of course, Taylor Swift, but more broadly, pop music, the Pop It Girls, and her book that came out this week called Hit Girls that I blurbed on the cover that you guys will absolutely love. And who I'm talking about is Nora Princiotti, who is the co-host of a podcast called Every Single Album that I think is under the umbrella of The Ringer on Spotify. And they review all sorts of albums, but I certainly was introduced via their Taylor Swift reviews of new albums, of re-records. Her and her co-host Nathan have such a compelling dynamic and an interesting balance of opinions about Taylor Swift's discography, about her lyrics and music and personal life. And I just love listening to them, and I've always wanted to have her on. So when the opportunity arose to chat about her book and then for me to slide in, 40 minutes of talking about Taylor Swift beforehand, I had to shoot my shot. So yeah, we have a really fun conversation. If you like the episode about Addison Rae, you'll love this book too, because she goes so much farther into the Max Martin lore, for example. Remember how I was talking about how he famously mixes up words and idioms. There's another thing that pretty early on in the book that she talks about that I mentioned last week. Last week was kind of a perfect lead-in because I was thinking about this book because I was about to interview her and I was talking about Addison Rae. And it just seemed like, a good time to have a few weeks where we dive into the pop girls of yesterday and today. But of course also touch on re-records and some TS lore and more. But also if you want to go out or out, by the way, you're going out tonight, Bejeweled vibes. Track 5 is July 19th, our summer residency at Chop Shop here in Chicago. Instead of touring track 5, it's just such a big production to put on. It's basically like putting on a wedding because it's a Be There in 5 live podcast show where I'm on stage. And then we basically just scream sing Taylor Swift songs for 3 hours after. In total, from sound check and balloon setups, and if I do something else rehearsals to clean up and leaving, I have to rent a space for 6 hours, and then I need there to be chairs, but then we have to move the furniture so we can dance, maybe we stood a chance. Anyways, it was kind of a hard thing to tour. So for now, we're just we'll do one in the summer and people can come to us if they want to in Chicago. We have a great venue, Chop Shop. It's super fun. And Mika's sponsoring this year, and you guys will go home with free product. I just figured out my Taylor Swift outfit. You can come alone. It's a perfect place to make friends. So many of you have made friends or bring a group of friends. It's a fun way to celebrate something or to just scream, sing, exile in a bar setting. You know what I mean? So that is July 19th, BeThereIn5.com/live-shows. If you want to watch this interview, go to YouTube, subscribe to Be There in 5 to humor me, because advertisers want video, but I don't think I really have a YouTube audience, so I don't know. But if you feel like it, go for it. Otherwise, hope you had a great weekend, and I'll catch you on the flip side. I'm so excited. It's going to be hot tomorrow, but I have a babysitter. I'm going to go live my best life and go to a concert, and it's peak hydration season, and I'm not sneaking in a flask. I am sneaking in liquid IV. Not that I need to sneak that in, but it's the perfect companion for your hottest summer nights, hottest summer plans, hottest summer days. They've just launched an exhilarating new flavor, Arctic Raspberry. And Liquid IV also has sugar-free solutions powered by LIV Hydroscience for smart hydration. And just to tell you at the top, you can visit liquidiv.com and use code BeThereIn5 at checkout for 20% off your first order, obviously. As many of you know, it's truly the most easy and convenient way to get hydration ever. I'm not a water truther. I don't want to be drinking tons of water. And it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal where just one stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. And powered by LIV Hydroscience, it's an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration with 3 times the electrolytes of leading sports drinks. In my house, we really are into the sugar-free options, the white peach, the lemon lime. They have rainbow sherbet, you guys. Rainbow sherbet's just important, I think, as a flavor, and adults don't consume it enough. But I'm hearing great things about the latest sugar-free flavor, Arctic Raspberry. And they have other fun ones like cotton candy, firecracker. But in general, if you're I can't be on an airplane without Liquid IV. Long nights, hot summer days, you name it. It's just a perfect way to come back to life when you're fading and to get the hydration you need. And no matter what summer brings, tear, pour, live more. Go to liquidiv.com and get 20% off your first order with code BeThereIn5 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order with code BeThereIn5 at liquidiv.com. You know what's nice is I get advertised products about like glowy skin all the time, but years ago I found a product that just like actually does make my skin glow. And I just don't even have to shift my gaze elsewhere because Osea's Undaria Algae Body Oil honestly has changed my life. I've been telling you for years. It gives you a summer glow. It gives you full hydration all over. It gives you that like red carpet sheen that I wondered for years how people just look like dewdrops out and about in all seasons in the summer and in drying weather. And Osea's best-selling Undaria Algae Body Oil is rich yet never greasy and clinically tested to instantly improve skin elasticity. Their iconic signature natural citrus scent features uplifting notes of mango, mandarin, grapefruit, lime, cypress, and it just has an amazing texture. It makes me feel soft and glowy, but also I just love that I can sit down or put on clothes and it's not greasy. I don't understand why it doesn't transfer, but it doesn't. That makes a huge difference for me to just not feel like I'm sticky. It makes me feel fresh, like I'm frolicking on a Malibu beach somewhere. Undaria Algae Body Oil is Osea's #1 best-selling product for a reason. One is sold literally every 30 seconds, which is crazy. It's rich yet never greasy and clinically proven to instantly improve skin elasticity, visibly firms and makes skin feel more sculpted and toned. Get healthy glowing skin for summer with clean vegan face and body care from Osea. Get 10% off your first order site-wide with code BeThereIn5 at OseaMalibu.com. You'll get free samples with every order and free shipping on orders over $60. Head to OSEAMalibu.com and use code BeThereIn5 for 10% off. Today, I am so excited to be here with Nora Princiotti, who I've wanted to talk to forever, given her podcast on Spotify called Every Single Album, where I wait with bated breath for her and Nathan's analysis of every re-record. RIP, we'll get to that, but I also wanted to talk about her incredible book, which is so Beth-coded. You guys will be obsessed with it. It's called Hit Girls. It celebrates the women who revolutionized pop music and examines the artists that really redefined the role of the pop star, not only the industry, but the culture more broadly. Like Britney opening the floodgates for the dupes, as we call them today, like Christina Aguilera and Jessica Simpson, and then the mall punk antagonists like Avril Lavigne, Ashlee Simpson, to how it evolved into dance hall and EDM as Rihanna experimented, or Kesha and Katy Perry and party anthems post-recession. And anyway, to quote myself, Hit Girls bridges our butterfly-clipped, bedazzled past with today's music world, revealing how the pop songs we belted in our bedroom shaped everything we're streaming now, which I blurbed because when I read this a while ago, I was like, oh my God, people are going to love this. And I'm so excited she's here. Welcome, Nora.
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this. And thank you for your blurb. It's a great blurb, and getting blurbs is stressful. So, like, I will forever be in your debt for that.
Getting blurbs is so uncomfortable. Nobody talks about that part of publishing. Basically, before your book comes out, you have to like reach out to people. It's like embarrassing. It's like, you don't know me. You're very well known and regarded. Can you read this book? I've never written one before. It's like, I hated it.
I asked Bowen Yang, who incredibly respectfully declined, or like definitely never saw that request, but a publisher was like, oh, like he's a little busy right now. I'm sure I'm not supposed to say that, but I just thought it was so funny because I was like, well, I'll shoot my shot here.
Honestly, I love the inside baseball of these convos. I try to shoot my shot with, Gia Tolentino,
Totally.
Casey Wilson. I mean, everyone I reached out to declined that I kind of like love in the pop culture commentary space. But it's like, yeah, people are busy.
Right. And
Also,
it's a big ask because it's like,
yeah,
can you read this whole book?
right.
And I'm sure, like, I think in some industries, like business books, I get the sense that people don't really read it. But like, I do think that, like, when I was reaching out, I was basically saying, please read this whole book. Like, read it from cover to cover, synthesize your thoughts, and
Yep.
put those into hopefully nice words that you're willing to have just like live on the cover of this in perpetuity. But you, Kate, were at the top of our list and so kindly agreed to do all of that labor. So thank you
Well,
again.
I think it's the norm to just like do a favor and high level scan and be like, this person's legit. And
Yeah, it's
yeah, it is
fine.
pretty wild because you don't know what's in it. In this economy in these days, you can't just endorse anything blindly.
Could you imagine? I have something like
Oh,
incredibly problematic buried in like chapter 4 just to test people.
yeah, it could Hit Girls could take a problematic turn
I mean, like
because
hit
it
me
at
maybe
one
one more
point was
time. Confused a
problematic.
lot of
Yeah.
people in its day.
Precisely, which we'll get to. I did an episode about like one hit wonders and Addison Rae last week that kind of like leads into this conversation because, I think there's a lot of conversation right now about artists like Addison kind of like leveraging the system and gaining their own power and leverage to make the art they want, ultimately not letting the system use them. By her kind of backing away and not getting stuck in the content churn of TikTok. And she's kind of doing things really differently. And I was examining kind of the one hit wonders of yesteryear and kind of that similar disposability of like, let's put, 20 to 30 artists on our roster. They'll subsidize the two that actually get hits. We'll drop the rest. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
was kind of this machine. And you talk about this through the lens of how pop really took over in the late 90s, early 2000s with like Britney as the blueprint. You talk about Britney, Beyonce, Rihanna, Gaga. I loved the Ashlee Simpson Avril revival because I just feel like we don't give Ashlee Simpson enough credit, but we'll get there. I'm going to pick a handful because we can't go through them all. But I do feel like since so many people here probably know both of us from our Taylor Swift, I was going to say fandom. Does that obsession, fixation? I don't know. So
I
we
like
have to.
fixation because it sounds moderately clinical, which
Yeah,
I'm not
no, it
speaking to
is.
you, but like to me, that feels right.
I'm wearing a sweatshirt that says none of it was accidental and not accidentally. These are just my clothes. But no, we gather here today in a world where Taylor Swift owns her masters. Well, I mean, were you surprised? How are you feeling? And more importantly, will I learn before I die if she recorded 25 or 75% of Reputation?
Okay, do you have an opinion? Did you think of that one way or another? Because when she put out the letter in the smallest font known to man and said, but what about Reputation Taylor's version? I'll tell you guys, I haven't even recorded 25% of it. I thought immediately that that meant I haven't even recorded a quarter of it. I have recorded less than a quarter of the album. My Every Single Album co-host, Nathan Hubbard, who's a brilliant man and an astute analyst of the English language, took it to mean I'm 75% through and I have 25% to go. And we talked about this on our pod. No one else, and no shade to Nathan, one of my favorite people on this earth. No one else in my entire life thought that that's what it meant. And so I want to see if anybody else had the same reaction that he did, or if he's just on an island and everybody else is like, no, she's recorded a quarter of Reputation. Is that what you thought?
I agree with you. Oh, the exact words were, I haven't even re-recorded a quarter.
Yeah, I think she's not even a quarter of the way through. Because the other thing is that if you
Wait,
think
now I'm
about,
getting tripped up. I haven't even.
I know it's
Yeah.
unlike Taylor to be imprecise in her syntax.
Wouldn't you say I haven't even recorded the last, like the final 25%? Like you wouldn't word it that way, right?
Yeah, no, I think it means I'm not even through a quarter of it. I haven't even done a quarter of it. Like I'm
Yeah.
20% of the way through. The other thing
Is
is that I
Nathan
think
sure about that? He's like,
no,
no, that's
he's
what it.
not. He just like
Okay.
that's when he read it. He was because we
Huh.
were talking about this maybe an hour or a couple hours after she published the letter. So it was all just like very fresh thoughts. And I do think that it's totally fair to read it that way, but I don't think anybody else has really had that reaction. I also think that if you think about the track list of Reputation, it's like really just the singles where one, we
Mm-hmm.
know that she did Look What You Made Me Do. And if she did, Ready for It, I did something bad, or just that sort of top quarter, top third, although
Mm-hmm.
maybe not all of them, of the really intense, I'm wounded and angry and vilified, and this is mostly about Kim and Kanye, and hadn't gotten to the Joe songs, I think that would make a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sense, both musically, but even more so thematically and emotionally. Like, I just can't imagine that she really wants to be doing that.
It's interesting because while in recent years I've long suspected she was going to buy them back at some point. If they were with a fairer partner, she can afford it. I think it's not just about money. Like on principle, she wanted to own her work. But it is curious timing wise because I do think the two big question marks in the re-record project were, yeah, the country twang and the vocal stylings of earliest Taylor in a fully different genre, and Reputation being this like stark departure from her previous albums that's notably more bombastic or angrier, that has a lot of ambiguity with the subject matter of who it's about. Like, I mean, who would say gorgeous at the beginning if there's all this Blake Lively stuff in the air? Like, there were so many questions I had about Rep that will go unanswered. And yeah, it's pretty interesting how of all the albums, I was like dying to hear how she did it was those two.
But they were definitely the two hardest. One of my friends said that Travis should do the gorgeous instead of the Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds kid, which I thought was really funny, but I don't think
Not
it'll ever
only
happen.
is that brilliant, that is a way to get people to talk about that and not that it's not the kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If she ever released Gorgeous Taylor's version, which I do not believe will ever happen, and it wasn't, and it was a different baby, a different person doing that intro. Not that I think we need confirmation that that feud is real, but it would just be so clear. And I don't know if she wants
Do you
to
think it's
wade in that
real?
fully. Yeah. I mean, I just like one, I've heard that from a few people.
Yeah.
Also, I do think that once, and you like me, I'm sure, can recognize a tree pain penned sentence
Yes.
anywhere. But once the statement about her subpoena had the like, Taylor didn't even see this movie, I was like, oh God, not
No, it
good.
was written with a level of like sass that was amazing and very like from her camp, not from like I also like the lightning fast people releases are always kind of a telltale. But also, do you think Scott Swift really was the one that like called into Friedman's team?
I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
I don't
Just
either.
because, first of all, so Kate, one thing that you've probably heard me say this on a podcast before, but I will just say it for everybody's benefit. I am not a lawyer. However, I am surrounded by them on a daily basis and therefore consider myself an amateur legal expert, if such a thing can
Amazing.
exist. She was not in any danger of needing to testify. Like, there
You
was
don't think?
absolutely no, there was no genuine argument. And you could see because all of that stuff and Brian Friedman's like, popping off about how she was being extorted and yada 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 without any evidence of it got thrown out so quickly. And if you read the judge's statements, he was like towing the line of getting sanctioned by the court, which I think
Okay.
he was willing to do because it seems like based on now that it's been dismissed and how quickly it got to that point, they just didn't really have that much of a legal argument, and
Mm,
therefore we're just trying to put as much pressure on Blake and Ryan and their whole squad in the court of public opinion to see if they could force a settlement or just, go scorched earth for the sake of going scorched earth because clearly these people don't like each other. But there was no, like, exactly like what that statement said. Taylor was one of several artists who licensed songs to the film.
hmm.
And even when you factor in that there was the anecdote about Baldoni going over to the house and like
The
Taylor
dragons. Yeah, yeah.
being there, it just like didn't, there was no reason to think that she was going to actually have to get up there, even if it had gotten to that point. And therefore, her dad, like, going way out on a limb to do all of this stuff, when I think if you were a member of her legal team, you were probably looking at what was going on and being like, yeah, this is super annoying, but we're not worried about this. Like, Taylor Swift is not going to have to do this. It just doesn't seem right to me.
Interesting. That's a good point. Yeah, I really didn't know what meaningful risk there was. I also am like, is Blake dense enough to like threaten? Obviously, she understands Taylor's position and power, even referring to her as one of her dragons and allegedly using her as a coercion tactic, though that might have been a stretch in and of itself. But it's like, on what planet would you say I'm going to release 10 years of our text? That's insane. I don't believe part of that too. Like,
Yeah. Well,
I
because
think,
you're telling me that, first of all, we have like one text message from Blake Lively that has become a public part of this dispute. And that single text message is not painting her in a very positive light. You're telling me that 10 years of text messages aren't going to be
Blake's too.
damaging to everybody. Right. Exactly.
Right. Oh,
Like,
I
this
know.
isn't, no one, I mean, I don't talk about anything important. And the lengths that I would go to avoid 10 years of my text messages becoming public, like, there's just no way. There's no famous person that's like, do what I want, or I'm going to release 10 years of our text messages. It's just totally, totally nonsensical.
It's nonsensical. It would be a profound violation of privacy on both sides. And yeah, it seems like there is merit to the feud. But I'm relieved. It's like, dang, between that and her not being involved and the Masters and just even her looking breezy as hell at that Knoxville wedding. I mean, I think you guys said on the podcast, like she's at rest.
Nathan says that a lot because he's more generous than I am. And he's like, she has earned this 10 times over and she can just like go be with her man and go to a nice wedding and have a glass of wine. And I'm like, back in the studio. Let's get an album, Taylor Allison. But I am happy for her.
I think that it makes me all the more interested in what this next album will be because I don't want to say Lover was at a time when there was less friction in her life, and that's what gave us the song Me. But
I
I
mean, I
am,
think it's fair to say that it was at a time when there was less friction in her life, whether or
and when
not
Pharrell's
that,
Happy was thriving,
yeah,
yeah, like people wanted that blockbuster song. Like I think that was a strategy more so than like a life phase thing,
yeah,
probably.
yeah, I don't know that I'll ever understand me. I think that like you need to calm down is better than it's given credit for.
I agree.
And I wonder if it wasn't paired with me, if it would have come off a little bit more as an exercise. And you know, the video's I think is fun. I think it's inarguably a little heavy-handed.
Hmm.
But if it hadn't been paired with the video, and if it hadn't been paired with me, and just those two songs being so kind of kiddie and over the top, saccharine, if people would look at You Need to Calm Down slightly differently. But it has like it's lasted in the live set list, which I think shows that she on some level recognizes that that one is a little bit of a different animal than me. But
It's Me sounds great on a piano, I will say. Yeah, You Need to Calm Down. I would get misty during the Eras tour, the rainbow bracelets, and I was like, God, this was probably making a lot of people feel very seen and included, and it's just so
yeah.
fun. But yeah, Lover is such a weird era to think about because and she does this well. It's like release there's a lot of discourse about Taylor's singles not usually being super fans' favorites. They're like the most palatable, mainstream, marketable singles that are earworms that get stuck in your head. But like for Lover to have Death by a Thousand Cuts and False God and Cornelia Street and like Cruel Summer being
Cruel
released
Summer.
last year or whatever, it's like it really, those choices will forever fascinate me because that album genuinely had some really good songs on it. And I just feel like it's crazy that I was able to get pretty easily reasonably priced tickets to Loverfest East and West for under $500 in the first queue. Like that just goes to like it was just a different time.
I know. What world would we live in if Loverfest had been able to go off? Like, I just don't know. Would we have had the Eras tour? Like, would we be here
Yeah.
right now? Would any of this be the same? I just have no idea.
My fear for Loverfest is that I was going to have to watch too much of other artists when I wanted
Mm,
to be there for Taylor.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it would have been fun. And like, it would have been almost a hilarious, amazing, slightly delayed millennial cringe version of like us older people going to like a festival, but wearing a flower crown 4 years too late. I think it would have been ripe for content.
It really would have been, instead of friendship bracelet coded, it would have been flower crown coded.
Oh, yeah. We'd
And
finally
a lot of
get our chance.
fringe, a lot of like rainbow fringe. Would
Oh,
have been
oh
fun.
my God. It's so, the rainbow fringe
The
outfit is the
rainbow
best.
fringe of it all.
I think that also with I was curious how. I mean, a lot of people are talking about that they think that maybe the Joe breakup and just the reality of like being in a very serious relationship where lyrically she's made it clear like she was in it, she wanted to get married, like she was going down with the sinking ship. I mean, So Long London is a masterclass of a breakup song that says everything we ever needed it to about that relationship. Do you think there's any merit to it genuinely being too raw to really delve back into her and Joe's origin story? Or like as an artist, isn't she like professionally conditioned to completely detach from the song's meanings once they're out into the world at a point?
I wonder if you can completely detach, just because sometimes I feel like with Taylor, I always like to pay attention to the moments where it feels a little bit like, okay, the lady doth protest a bit too much. And She loved to say so much during the Eras tour, and she said this before, but she really was harping on this during the Eras tour. Like, these songs, once I performed them for all of you, they were about these moments in my life, some of them good, some of them bad, but they're not about that anymore. They're about us.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, right. Like,
She,
you're still
yeah, she's
thinking
like,
about whatever
don't
you were thinking
send
about.
John Mayer death threats. Like, I think
I mean, and that's like, look, like the man has made a lot of mistakes, but I think that's a message we can all get behind. But
yeah,
with some
Jake
of
Gyllenhaal did
them,
not get the same PSA.
no.
It's kind of funny when those caveats come out. But sorry, what were you saying?
I just to say, like, I don't think she can completely detach, at least in some cases, because she
Yeah.
claims that she can, and therefore I raised my eyebrow.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, I mean, it's not just like parts of rep are about falling in love, lovers about being in love, folklore and Evermore. He was like so intertwined with the making of it, sounds like, and got delayed Grammys for it. He's just very associated with her albums. And it's a very long and very real relationship. I could imagine that that's a challenge in many ways. But I think too, because she kind of, there was like maybe a Rolling Stone or maybe it was a Time article a few years ago where she like really hard sold the Rep Vault tracks. Like she almost it couldn't.
Yeah,
Do you remember that article where she was like talking about the Rep re-record like she was really excited about it?
yeah. I like, here's what I will say. I'm not accusing Taylor Swift of being a liar, certainly, but like, I wonder, even though I do believe that that 25% refers to 25% done. I wonder if that's like the main album and she'd done the vault because she was really talking about Reputation at one point in a way that indicated that she had been spending some time on that re-recording. And she did talk up those vault tracks. And I do, like, to be clear, I don't think she can disassociate from the meanings of the songs completely. I do think she could do it enough to get a re-recording done if she needed to, right? Like, would it necessarily have all of the same feeling? Probably not. We've seen that come up in other re-recordings. She could make it happen if she needed to. I just wonder if, given she no longer has the financial incentive to, she did save the two trickiest ones for last. In the case of Reputation, especially, there are some particular emotional complications, and both related to Joe, but also related to, I do think the gorgeous thing would be tough. I just wonder if she's like, why would I do this? Like, what? This isn't my problem.
Well, okay, so with the to wrap up the 25% piece, my take is that if you haven't done something, the basic negation would be I haven't done this. When you say I haven't even, you're emphasizing and intensifying that to a point where you're trying to, I think, express how surprisingly little progress was made. And I do think she meant less than 25%. But this, I wonder if these semantics or like what actually happened is she tried to record a lot of it and only 25% is like clean, done, final cut. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
she's probably been in the studio and trying and maybe it wasn't working. I do think the vault tracks have to be done because she mentioned them. So she
Yeah.
has to release them. But also our argument for the complication of like debut, for example, would go out the window if she actually does release it, which it sounds like she's open to. And it's hilarious to word it like, if that's something you guys would be interested in.
Oh my God.
I
So
mean, hello.
coy. Ridiculous.
Um, but do you think the 13 was it 13 eyes in the word this?
12.
12. Oh,
So
TS12, right.
which would be TS12. Yeah.
You think that means something?
Honestly, in my like true heart of hearts gut, no, I don't.
How
I
dare you
think
troll
she
us in this
I think
letter?
she just like hit the eye a bunch of times and it wound up being 12. I really don't think that half of this stuff is intentional. I just think that she has woven such a complicated web that, like, okay, how many numbers do we associate with Taylor Swift? Like, there's 12 because TS12. 13 always seems to mean something, even if I can't tell what it is. So
There's
debut
the
would be
one.
1, Reputation would be 6.
Yep.
You're already getting to a point where there's like half of the numbers between 1 and 15, if
Right.
she does something that adds up to that, it allegedly means something. So she's actually like run out of things that can't accidentally be perceived as Easter eggs.
So
Well, and
I
it's
actually
also
do think that
like
this might mean something, but I don't know. Maybe I'm clowning again.
look, the 12, it's like the one thing that stood out in the letter, and there's something noticeable about that. I don't think it's a ridiculous one, certainly. You and I are both old enough to remember that the Easter eggs used to be like they weren't subtle. It would
Lover
be
was in
like,
lights and they that covered 20% of the screen. And she said nobody had guessed the album title yet. Do you remember that?
yes, yes. I mean, I do think that we will look back on history and recognize the use of Arbor Day in the lover Instagram wipe and posts with the 7 palm trees
Oh,
and then the picture of her. Like that was when we flew the coop. That was when things started to get out of hand. Prior
I
to
rebranded to Be
that,
There in Five
though,
Holes in a Fence. I spiraled. I had to quit after that. I wasn't proud of
that
who I became.
no, truly, like that was the moment when we all lost our minds. But I do think that it was her fault because like Arbor Day is so fucking random. And if you are teaching your fan base that we have to be paying attention to things like, oh, well, the 26th is going to be Arbor Day. I also can't believe that I remember that it was the 26th of whatever month it was. I think April. People are going to start to like draw some pretty wacky conclusions. Prior to that, though, the Easter eggs used to be like spelling out Nick Jonas in capital letters. Like it wasn't Joe
Right.
Jonas in capital letters. I just talked to Miley Cyrus and now I'm like my Jonas brothers are all like screwed up. We knew the answers. We weren't digging
It's
for,
true.
we weren't searching for crumbs the way that we do now.
But I will say the Lover era, like there, it was April 26th, and which was, remember the Reputation documentary came out on Netflix, and she made a very specific comment about in promoting it about there being 118 instruments used on the Rep tour, and then Lover did come out 118 days after she said that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like that. I think there were some things that were very numerical in that era that, yeah, spun out for the worse. There was a while when we were going a little crazy for random holidays. I forgot about that. Arbor Day. It's
That's
amazing.
why fascination, I think, is
Kate from the Beyond, if I may interject. So listen, my reputation had never been worse. Back when Five Holes and Offense came out. I wanted to do some quick fact checking here, and I think that's what Nora would want to in the name of pop music herstory. Initially, I was going to fact check the instruments because I said it wrong just now. Whatever I said, that was incorrect. It was actually 103. But what's even more wrong is that the numerology Easter egg hunts are from baseless origins because sometimes I can't remember if this clowning comes from a place of legitimacy. And while I actually don't remember clowning over Arbor Day, I remember clowning over Scrabble Day. If I may provide a defense for the fence, we weren't entirely wrong. To quote Leanne Rimes on the Coyote Ugly soundtrack, it was the right kind of wrong. So okay, two things. In late 2018, Reputation World Tour just wrapped up. She posts an Instagram with her mom saying, "Let the games begin," or something. And she's playing Scrabble. The Scrabble tiles add up to 7. We are awaiting Taylor Swift's 7th studio album, TS7. I don't think it's a stretch that we were like, ooh, TS7's coming. What could have been a stretch, but actually didn't end up being a stretch, was that we assumed what she was implying was that TS7 was coming on renowned bank holiday, National Scrabble Day, April 13th. When we have a 13 and when we have an obscure national holiday that means absolutely nothing to nobody and we would never celebrate or be aware of it otherwise, that is obviously when something's going to happen with Taylor Swift. Additionally, when the Reputation performance comes out on Netflix, she out of nowhere says there were 103 instruments used on the Reputation World Tour. At the time, we were like, oh my gosh, 103 days from now is renowned bank holiday, National Scrabble Day, because I believe she said that on January 1st and April 13th was 103 days from that date. Here's where it got confusing. So February 24th, she posts 7 palm trees, and we're like, oh my God, TS7's coming. I was like, oh my God, palm trees, coconuts, stars. reach for the stars, climb every mountain higher, S Club 7, TS7's coming. I was spiraling. I was counting stars like One Republic. There were 61. The problem was 61 days from that date, 2/24, was April 26. Much to my chagrin, I was discouraged. I was hoping it was renowned bank holiday, National Scrabble Day, but it turned out to not be irrelevant. Regardless, that's when we spiral into thinking it's a countdown. Following the 7 palm trees, which we assume were for TS7, there was a photo of her on a staircase where she is sitting on the 6th step, and her hand is on the 7th. So she, like us, is reaching for TS7. It's kind of like 1 numeric photo's a nothing, 2's a maybe, 3's a party and a pattern. So if we have 7 palm trees, she's on the 6th step the next day, and then the next day there are 5 holes in a lattice fence. It's a fence with the eyelashes on it, like lift cars. A lattice fence. She's staring through, and there's 5 clear holes. Like, I literally wrote on my Instagram story, Houston, we have a countdown. You know, guys, I'm still embarrassed. And if I recall correctly, the day before the 7 palm trees, she also posted a photo of her cat on a tufted ottoman. We were doing a lot of tufting in the 2010s, and there were roughly 8 like button tufts on this ottoman. So then it was like 8, then we had 8, 7, 6, 5. Now, in hindsight, we had no business counting those button tufts. That was tuft stuff. It was just a photo of a cat, but I really thought we were onto something. And the following days weren't countdown adjacent. They were photos from an Elle photo shoot she had coming out. On 3/1, she pens this Elle article. It's a 30 things I learned before 30 type article. And number 26 is that she loves countdowns. And what's funny is that February 26th is the day that she didn't post the countdown, and people kind of lost their minds. And to the point where people were saying, well, no, it's still a countdown because she forgot. We have 7, 6, 5, forgot. And I was like, that feels forced. And I was pretty gone at this point. I was clowning harder than my pre-Cana counselor. If you know, you know. He was an emergency bass painter. Listen to my episode Sexy Cana if you have no idea what I'm talking about. But no, I don't think she forgot. I think we were just far gone at that point. And anyway, what ended up happening, though, sometimes a clown is deserving of her crown. We kind of forget about it or embarrassed about the 5 holes in a fence of it all. But April 13th, she announces the first single off of TS7, Me, proving that the Scrabble tiles that added up to 7 from the Let the Games Begin Instagram that we thought were attached to National Scrabble Day, April 13th, that was a legitimate Easter egg that we got right. And the 103 days from January 1st, where she gave that random number assigned to instruments, was also right that it was a countdown to April 13th, renowned bank holiday National Scrabble Day, where she announced the first single off of TS7. Additionally, the 26th ended up being a thing, which was 61 days from 2/24 when she posted the 7 palm trees with the 61 stars, because on April 26th, 13 days after renowned bank holiday National Scrabble Day, the Me music video and single came out. And that was 61 days from the Instagram post on 2/24 with the 7 palm trees and the 61 stars. And additionally, on 3/1, which is 13 backwards if you care, the Elle article on question 26, again, April 26, she said, I love countdowns. Therefore, she was confirming that she was counting down to 2 dates, April 13th and April 26th. And we're not crazy. You're crazy. Don't blame me. Lover made us crazy. If it didn't, you weren't doing it right. And neither were we technically, but we weren't doing it entirely wrong either. You know what I mean? Okay. That concludes my defense. Thank you for your time. Another month, another group of Beths that have told me they've had the best night's sleep of their life via their Helix mattress. Claire Wait the Muffins being one of them. Not to call you out with your consumer purchases, Claire. Helix is the best. Helix is not your average internet mattress company. They have done sleep studies that have proven people have better sleep with this mattress. It's the most awarded mattress brand. You can go on their website and take a sleep quiz, and it's ask you what position you sleep in, if you have a partner, what their vibe is. It doesn't say what their vibe. What is your partner's vibe? Stomach, back, side sleeper, if you tend to get hot. My mattresses have cool toppers on them, which is crazy, but it helps keep you cool. What kind of support you need. They have big and tall mattresses. They have kids mattresses. They have so many different options. They have a 100-night risk-free trial and a 30-day break-in period, because obviously it is a little nerve-wracking to make a big purchase online, but also for something that matters as much as your mattress. But also that's a reason why people need to invest in their mattress. I think that they forget how much you use it, even though it's not the most exciting purchase. But yeah, the 30-second sleep quiz will find your mattress match. They have 3 lines, the Core Collection, the Luxe Collection, and the Elite. Most of mine are Luxe. They're 13 and a half inches tall. They have 6 layers. They have this like quilted pillow top and they have springs and foam. It's like such a high end mattress that I just would have never expected to pop out of a box and come to life before my eyes. It was voted as Wired's best mattress of 2024. I've had so many Beths tell me it's not only comfortable, but it's helped with back pain or sleeping through the night or being too hot, whatever it is. And Helix is one of our longest term partners around here, and we love them. And if you want to go to helixsleep.com/BeThereIn5 for 27% off site-wide, exclusive for listeners of Be There in 5, that's helixsleep.com/BeThereIn5 for 27% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. helixsleep.com/BeThereIn5 for 27% off site-wide, exclusive for listeners of Be There in 5. Shopping and planning for groceries can be simple and stress-free. Imagine having your weekly cart filled for you with personalized picks and then shipped right to your door. And taking all that off my plate and putting food on my plate is why I love Hungryroot. I got a shipment yesterday and made 2 of the meals, one for lunch, one for dinner, because I was so excited. One was like a chicken Caesar salad, which, to the credit of Hungryroot, to their competitive advantage, if you will, instead of a meal delivery service that's going to send you pre-portioned ingredients that you have to use with a specific recipe, which isn't always great if you don't feel like cooking, or a grocery delivery service that sends you full-size groceries that I don't always know what to do with the groceries recipe-wise. It sends me full-size groceries that come with recipes I can use those groceries for, but I do not have to do the recipes. I can just use the groceries, or I can kind of ad-lib. For example, I got a Caesar salad kit, and I also got a chicken zucchini situation. I made the chicken zucchini situation for Greg grilled, but then I made myself chicken cutlets because I wanted something fried and put them in a chicken Caesar salad. And I just kind of modified things a bit depending on personal preferences. Hungryroot takes the stress out of grocery shopping by filling your cart with personalized selections that get smarter with every order. They have really good stuff for kids. They have smoothies, they have kid snacks, they have sweets, and like prepackaged stuff like little crackers with hummus. I like their little bags of pickles. Teddy loves they have like healthy candies that seem to have better for you ingredients. I also got some really good like organic peanut butter cups that I'm pretty stoked about. And whether you're gluten-free or dairy-free, high protein, whatever else, Hungryroot can help you eat well. And with my offer, you'll get a free item like a premium protein, veggie, or sweet treat in every box for life. So take advantage of this exclusive offer for a limited time. Get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/BeThereIn5 and use code BeThereIn5. That's hungryroot.com/BeThereIn5, code BeThereIn5 to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/BeThereIn5, code BeThereIn5. The other question I want to talk to somebody about retailer that I feel like I get a lot of pushback when I bring up. I'm not totally sure why, because it feels clear to me. Her and Olivia Rodrigo have beef, and the grudge is about Taylor. And that's pretty clear, no?
Yeah, totally. 100%.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sure as a comment, Taylor Swift is an amazing, passionate fandom that defends her endlessly, but it makes it hard sometimes to have an opinion and people jump down your throat. And then sometimes I get scared to give my opinion. But you actually are a music critic and you're kind of in a different space than I am. Do people kind of let you be more objective and critical, even though you're also a personal fan?
It sort of depends. I think the right people do. I mean, I'm trying because my O-Rod knowledge is not quite at the level of forensics as it is for Taylor. I do recall that there are, I think, 2 valid ways to read The Grudge. I think that some of those lyrics, to me, because songs don't have to be about just one person and one thing.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, come on. You're kidding me if you don't think that she was thinking about Taylor Swift when she was writing this or singing this, at least some of the time. Also, here's my thing with the 2 of them. Not everybody has to be friends. Like, I don't think that anybody did anybody truly wrong in what it seems like we can pretty accurately deduce about how that went down, which is that Olivia Rodrigo, one of the brightest young pop stars we have, came up while referencing Taylor Swift as like a formative artist of her youth a lot, and was kind of christened as, here is our first like Tay daughter pop star. This is the first post Taylor true pop girly potential Pantheon member. And that's great. And Taylor gave her the ring that she wore while she was recording Red. And there was a lot of there was a love fest and mutual support. And then I don't know if it was Olivia was doing it a little bit more than Taylor was comfortable with, or if it was just the song. It was just Deja Vu borrowing quite a bit from Cruel Summer on an album that became huge and had a couple other instances of pretty clear indebtedness to other songs, namely Misery Business, that ended up getting corrected. And
Yeah.
maybe when Taylor went and asked to be given credit, it just didn't go over very well. I think that's pretty obvious based on that interview that Olivia gave. I'm forgetting the publication where she said, I wouldn't do that. I think that's fair. I think it's totally fair for Olivia Rodrigo to be like, come on, you're Taylor Swift. This is a little annoying. And I think it's also kind
Right.
of fair for Taylor Swift to be like, I got a pretty decent argument that you're borderline sampling my song. And if you're going to talk about me this much, like, maybe bend the knee a little bit and do this. And maybe that means that they're never going to be close friends. And on some level, is that sad? I mean, I guess so, because Taylor Swift clearly means a lot to Olivia Rodrigo on some level. But like, there are people that I don't like. I'm sure there are people that you don't like, and it's fine. Like, we have this issue with two women, I think, not being friends with each other. And it's like, people don't have to be sunshine and roses every second of every day. I don't think that it's like a reputation level beef, but I do think that it is a beef.
Yeah, it almost makes me feel crazy when people push back on it because to your point, that article, like what Olivia says it herself, like
We like each other. It's
it's just
incredibly obvious.
it is what it is, and that's fine. And I agree with you. I think that like people's hesitance to accept it is, I think the edit that Taylor Swift did it out of like the nothing new vibe of like potential jealousy or fear of the next up and coming pop star. But to your point, I think like this is a business transaction that if another artist performed via their team that you didn't really like hold in high regard, it might just be like, that's annoying, but whatever. But for me, when I've had bad interactions with people that are like my heroes that I like worship, my reaction's all the more strong to something that might not be that personal because the letdown is so
Totally.
severe.
Totally.
And I really think that, yeah, Taylor Swift was her absolute idol. And she was thinking that that would go over as a nod, an homage. But Taylor is a business person. Her team's pretty serious about
And
IP.
she cares pretty, right, exactly. She cares pretty deeply about credit and credit for what she sees as work that she did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just was curious from someone that's like in the industry, like if that is a fair thing to say, because I think like people just don't want to. But I mean, the thing is, we know her enemies started out friends. Like Taylor Swift's open that she has beef with people. Like that happens
Right.
in life. Doesn't mean anybody's a bad person. It is fascinating. Okay, so leading into your book, I appreciated your Taylor Swift chapter because it must have been pretty hard for you to focus. But what you talked about was her kind of role in developing like modern online fandom. You start with one of my favorite things from the archives, which is her MySpace posts.
Incredible.
And they're so good.
Work of art.
It really is. And it's something that we all did too. I mean, it's literally so high school. The days before we realized our internet activity would be immortalized are so charming and sometimes alarming. But hers, it's all pretty mild, all things considered. So, how, yeah, can you explain how you kind of figured out that that's what you wanted to focus on and what that chapter is about, retailer?
So, in a lot of ways, she sort of helped me figure out what the book was really going to be about, because I had this idea where I just really wanted to be able to spend some time writing about the pop stars of, I hate to say yesteryear, although I was recently informed that my book had been placed in the history section on Amazon.
Wait, what's wrong with you? I use yesteryear all the time. Is that
I
not
know.
the
Well,
right word?
I hate defining us as like, the
Ah,
past,
the days of yore.
the days of yore. Yeah. In olden times in the 2000s. And I knew that I wanted to write about Britney, but I also wanted to write about Gaga and Katy Perry and Rihanna and Beyonce and Taylor and Ashlee Simpson, and was like, okay, what is the way to tie all of this together? And I think the experience of covering Taylor so much over the last few years really helped me crystallize that just the state of the pop star is
Yeah.
different now than it used to be. And we look at these people and we go, this is who we expect to be at the Grammy Awards performing, but also taking home the hardware. These are the artists who we expect to be reading about, not just in People and Page Six, but in the New Yorker and the Atlantic, even like in spaces of real music critical, but also cultural analysis, and just how much of a shift that felt like it represented from when I was growing up and really obsessed with all of these artists. But I do think there was just so much of a sense that pop is, I'll use a word that you used earlier, disposable and sort of shallow. And again, to bring it back to Addison Rae, like that album just came out and it is the most, and intentionally so, kind of shiny, flimsy coated piece of art. And automatically, really serious people listen to it and go, okay, she's working on multiple levels. This is intentional. There is like authorship and authorial intent going on beneath these songs. This isn't just like some girl who wanted to put on a mini skirt and do a little TikTok dance and get famous off of it. And so I was like, okay, how did that happen? Like, how did we get from there to here? And so what I end up doing is, I think I went through all the artists that I really wanted to talk about and sort of figured out the ways in which I feel like they broke down something in the mold that collectively helped us make that shift. And so as part of that with Taylor, I don't think of her canonically as a 2000s artist. Basically everybody else in the book, with the exception of at the very end, the sort of like recession pop chapter that has a lot of Gaga and Katy Perry and Kesha and a lot of that like just right around 2009 wave. Some of those artists I think you associate with the 2010s just as much, and Gaga obviously is still really thriving. But everybody else I basically think of as a core 2000s artist.
Mm-hmm.
And then Taylor, it's so different, right? Because she did get her start there. She was incredibly active throughout the 2010s. Also, as we sit here today, like maybe 20 years from now, we will think of this decade as being the core decade of Taylor Swift because of the tour and because of just how big that she's gotten. But I am me and I have my background and I am obsessed with Taylor Swift. So I knew that there needed to be a Taylor chapter. And so I really challenged myself to think of her specifically within the context of the 2000s. And where that brought me was to kind of get into how early on she did really start doing the work of building her fan community online and how that really ended up being the blueprint for modern fandom online, which I do think is a huge part of why pop stars are taken so seriously now, because people do have this understanding that they are basically like commanding armies. And I
Yeah.
don't say that unintentionally because I think we talk about stans often using the language of war. Like there are stan armies and they have battles. And
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
just like so associated with an idea of there being real raw power within those groups.
Yeah.
And with Taylor, I think the thing that's fun about it is that she starts doing that because she's such a millennial. Like she's such a native to spaces like MySpace. And it really bled between this is a 15-year-old girl who is like talking about whose pictures from middle school and early high school look fugly with her friends online. But then months later, she is actively using that platform to distribute the song Tim McGraw and campaign for people to call radio stations and ask them to play it so that she can prove that her music actually did have the fan base that it had, but that some of those institutional gatekeepers like radio didn't recognize because they weren't running around MySpace and they weren't looking for, the music that people were putting on their profiles. And they just didn't quite have access. So doing that when she was so used to using, nascent social media herself, I just thought was a really fun time to explore. But I do think that like when you trace the roots of how big her fan base has become, I think the thing that clicked for me is that like it goes all the way back and it really does start at square one.
Oh, you're so right. And it's almost an interesting slash unusual commitment on her part. There's just a level of fame where I think you just need some insularity from chatter, opinions, negativity, like, and you aren't active online and in communities and message boards and comment sections for your own like sanity. And I think a lot of artists like get there pretty fast where they kind of have to tune a lot of it out. And I don't know at what point if it's Taylor or her team that was actually Taylorking, but she really committed for the until rep, like to engaging with fans directly, not only through stuff like, Swift Miss or the secret sessions or whatever it was, but like she just, yeah, a big part of her strategy was like making us all think that at one point that could be us. We could meet her. We could be friends. She could reply to our comment. And she's the most inaccessible person in the world that managed a level of accessibility throughout most of her career.
I do think she's still online. Like, I
You
think that
do?
she must have some way of weeding stuff out or having somebody do it for her. But I was this Nathan who said this to me? I think it was Nathan. Sorry, Nathan, if I'm confusing stories. But somebody that I know who I strongly believe was my co-host, Nathan Hubbard, left an Eras show like at the same time as her motorcade and just like saw her in the back of the car, just like pull out her phone and start scrolling.
Really?
Yeah. And so he was like, I really think that she, after a show, like logs on and looks at what people are talking about. And I do believe it because of the fluency that she has with things like the way that people talk about Evermore as like least favorite daughter
True.
and the way that she just seems to very quickly know all the little in jokes and all the little bits. I think she continues to tailor, but I love what you said about how everybody sort of feels like she could reply to their comment because I do think that she has perfected this sort of scaled intimacy where obviously not everyone is going to get a response, but everyone does have the understanding that it's possible. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it's kind of this like digital, I think I make this analogy, but it's sort of just how I think about it in my head is, you know, how in her choreography, there's so much pointing. Like she's always pointing because it's
Or
always
like
this
pointing
like,
with
yeah, with just like
this
one
hand a lot.
finger. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's so much, you know, arm directly pointed out into the crowd because she's in these huge, huge, huge spaces. And it communicates the idea that all 70,000 are still individuals. And so she could just be pointing at one person, even though everybody is sort of supposed to receive the gesture as though not necessarily it is them, but it could be. And I think that Taylor King is kind of the same, where it's like
Mm.
you just might, and you know, every time that you're talking to somebody about Taylor Swift, that it's possible that you could wake up the next day and you have a bajillion notifications because Taylor Swift liked your comment or responded even.
Conversely, when we all stayed up all night to listen to tortured poets who chat about her online and her sanctimoniously performing soliloquies I'll never see, we were like, is this play about us? Like, does she hate us? Like,
I
I don't know.
mean,
I think
definitely yes, but like she still does it.
I know. I think that you do a really good job capturing fan culture, capturing like the role of those early online days from like the No It's Becky Tumblr meme. That's a great example of her being, I love those moments when she's in on the joke. And I also love that two things. Well, one, are you ever going to release that 3,000 word document? What was that?
My
This episode is brought to you by Amika. They're so wonderful to the show, to the Beths. They're going to be giving out free product at my show. And also, I actually try. Okay, so their Frizz Me Not Hydrating anti-frizz treatment and their Forget Frizz anti-frizz shampoo and conditioner, my sister has been raving about. And people that live in high humidity or have hair that tend to get, my hair doesn't tend to get that frizzy, so I hadn't been using it. But I did an experiment the other day where I put it on half my head and then I got in my steam shower and whoa, it really held up. It was kind of crazy. And it gave me one of the best blowouts of my life in terms of hold. I'll put hopefully by now I put that video on Instagram. If not, stay tuned. But the rules of smoothing frizz are simple and finite. Lock in moisture and lock out frizz for a salon perfect blowout with new hydrating anti-frizz treatment And Forget Frizz Anti-Frizz Shampoo and Conditioner. The result is a glossy, sleek blowout like you just the salon, no appointment required. For example, their hydrating anti-frizz treatment, it's kind of a spray that you just spray onto your hair before you heat treat it, before you blow dry it. It will smooth frizz for 72 hours and lock in 3.4 times more hydration. And Forget Frizz shampoo and conditioner reduces frizz by up to 74% for up to 72 hours in high humidity. One thing I love about Amika is they have 11 collections to ensure there are options for all hair types, textures, and styles. So you can go on their website, take a hair quiz. It'll point you to what products work for you. I'm a huge fan of so many different things. You've heard me talk at length about like Perk Up Dry shampoo, for example, which I can't live without, among other things. But truly, for summer, for high humidity, if your hair tends to get frizzy, try this and report back. It's a pretty crazy product, and you'll see it via my Instagram story that like literally not even a steam shower could penetrate. But to pick up Amika's new line of smoothing anti-frizz products, go to loveamika.com/BeThereIn5. On that page, you'll also find all of my Amika faves like Perk Up Dry Shampoo, Soul Food Hair Mask, and the Superfruit Star Lightweight Hairstyling Oil. For June, Amika is giving my listeners a one-time use code of 15% off your first order. Go to my page at loveamika.com/BeThereIn5. Use code BeThereIn5 at checkout. That's loveamika.com/BeThereIn5. Code BeThereIn5 to get 15% off your first order.
Actually, my fiance was asking me about this the other day. I used to have, and this was before, this was long before the Eras Tour. This was before Folklore Evermore, right around when the Masters stuff was just bubbling up. I lived in Boston and I was single and I was going on a lot of app dates. And I was noticing that a lot of guys, like straight guys in their mid 20s, suddenly wanted to talk about Taylor Swift because I
Really?
think there was like the dam hadn't broken, but there was just starting to be this understanding that like one, this person has just been around for so long. Like she's been a part of our lives for so long. She must be doing something right. Two, all of a sudden it was like a business thing. It was like, oh, Taylor Swift is in the world of finance and the master's
Yes.
catalog, there's a dispute and I am a boy and I like boy topics. So like, can you explain this to me? And so I was just noticing that like I was going on all these dates and talking about Taylor Swift. And obviously if someone would give me an inch of a crack of opening a door to go there, like I was just running through it. And then at one point, I think it was just sort of like towards the end of a night, and I was like, you know what, like we need to go, but I'll just write this down and send it to you. And so I was like going home and I started typing on my phone, just like sort of here's what I think you need to understand about how this has all been a master plan that Taylor Swift has executed over the course of years and years and at this point decades. And then it did become a 3,000 word document.
I also love that you sent that to somebody in a romantic context.
Yeah, no, I would just shoot it over to people.
Would they respond?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would.
it's funny. Now I'm interrogating this for the first time, really. I don't think it like ended any budding romances prematurely,
No.
but now I'm like, maybe it did, and I just didn't notice. I never got the sense that anyone was like, this girl just texted me a 3,000 word notes app document about Taylor Swift. Like, I better run for the hills. Although,
Although you want them
can't
to
rule
run
it
for the
out.
hill because that's never not going to be part of you. That's how I feel. I'm like, if you don't want me to exhaust you at a dinner party about a topic you bring up in
Yeah.
the pop
Yeah.
culture realm, you're not,
I
not for
I
me.
also was like in such an era where, and like apologies to all of these men, I knew that I lived in Boston and I had a wonderful life there and I worked at the Boston Globe and was loving what I was doing. But like I knew that I was not gonna settle there. Like I wasn't really serious about anyone, which meant that I was just kind of doing bits all the time,
I
which like can
love
be a very
bits.
fun way to date, but I just like I was a little bit of a shithead. But that's okay.
No, I love that so much. And honestly, it's kind of like the grassroots campaign to tackle misogyny and male opinions of Taylor Swift because I get in so many conversations to this day. A lot of people have evolved, but a lot of people like literally cannot get out of their brain. Like she just writes songs about dudes she dates and like, the whole like
Yeah.
2013 bit. And it incenses me and I will go off and over talk about it because I feel like it's my duty. And I think everyone's better off for your Word document. And I personally would love to read it. I love anything in a document. You know, the Jack and Lord PowerPoint on the internet.
Of course, of course. I mean, the Jack and Lord PowerPoint, the Taylor Carly PowerPoint. There's some really wonderful PowerPoints floating around the World Wide
Oh,
Web.
I found a 16-page PDF explainer of the history of Taylor and Maddie that I was like, thank you. Because if I wasn't super in tune with 1975 or their historical friendship or any of it, and it just really framed Tortured Poets in a big way for me.
I
Um,
love the 1975 so much. And
yeah, are you like a long-term fan?
oh my God, I love that band so much. And I like bands don't usually do it for me in quite the same way. I love that band so much. And therefore, I try to learn as little about Maddie Healy as humanly possible because it really helps the listening experience. But unfortunately, through certain PowerPoints and other experiences that I think we've all had over the last few years, things have gotten in the way of that. But it's a lifelong project.
Well, usually with bands like that, like people aren't doing the kind of forensics. And it is a
Yeah,
little like, yeah, weird to have been into something for so long and to not have dug as deeply, but already have your established loyalty and interest in the music there. I'm curious because you bring this up, and I'm very interested in this too, because I think it applies to influencers and like everything we do on the internet. But you talk about the how authenticity was weaponized against pop stars. Can you kind of elaborate on like what that looked like for the early pop starlets and like Avril and where you think we're at today? I think it's a really interesting thing for women in general.
totally. So, like, in the context of Avril, and this is true of Ashlee Simpson to some degree, so much of the 2000s and especially the early 2000s, it's in the shadow of the 90s. The 90s is obsessed with grunge, alt rock, these sort of subgenres within rock that have had a relatively easy time relative to basically all other genres, but especially to pop, of being taken really seriously. Like of being very quickly and in a frictionless way associated with art and meaning. And so we're coming from this place of basically like if you are standing on a stage holding a guitar or even like near some guitars, there is an idea that you fit into the lineage of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and music that has moved culture and has stood the test of time and been lauded as great art, or at least that you are trying to fit into that lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in particular in the early 2000s, while that was still very present in how people understood music, popular
Mm-hmm.
music, the artists that had the toughest time with it were the pop stars who kind of looked like rockers a little bit. So, like all of the pop punk girlies. And so, primarily, Avril Lavigne had this arc where she breaks out a little bit as a reaction to the earliest Britney era. And some of it was boy bands and the teen pop that kind of came right before Britney broke out as a solo artist, but she was really seen as like the antithesis of Britney Spears. And initially gets all of this attention and was like lauded for being so different from Britney Spears in ways that related to the rock coded signifiers that people were much more inclined to kind of celebrate. And so it's, oh, she is a songwriter. She
Mm-hmm.
has an interest in actually working on the music. She isn't just like an empty vessel for hooks. The problem is that in reality, Britney Spears and Avril Lavigne basically had the same background. Like they are major label artists who are brought up through the same system and who are making music that has some clear variance in genre, but or at least in aesthetics within genre. I think, you know, there's a whole pop is not really a genre. It's sort of like a set of principles and what you're trying to accomplish with music that can sound very different. Avril ends up facing all of these sort of like purity tests because while she's initially like celebrated for that, she's a pop star just as much as Britney Spears is a pop star. Like they're both trying to succeed on TRL and on the radio and for relatively the same fan bases. So there's this really quick, very quickly the rug gets pulled out from her when it starts to trickle out that, she's not writing every lyric. She's working with songwriters and she is involved in the process somewhat, but she's mostly having these songs written with her in the room and adding a line or two, but she's not sitting down and pouring her heart out into all of these songs because that's not her training. Like that's not where she came from. That wasn't what she did on the first album. It starts to be taken as this like betrayal because since she
Yeah.
existed for people in this mold of, oh, well, you're not like those other girls. You're not like Britney Spears. The idea that she wasn't someone who behaved in exactly the same way as like a 90s grunge rock band, all
Right.
of a sudden equals that she's a fraud.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's not like it doesn't really make sense, right? Because Avril is a funny example and she's sometimes I think that's why she's the best example, but also why she's an interesting one and a little bit of a tricky one in some ways because she is a thorny character. She took credit for things that she probably didn't do. And so she fed into it, but I think that was because she was subject to the same messaging as everyone else, right? Like she had been fed over and over and over this idea that rock is serious and pop is
Mhm.
not.
Right.
And probably wasn't old enough or just like couldn't recognize that she basically existed within a major label pop star producing system. And
Right.
part of what was really interesting to me to realize is I do think it's really, really different now. Like Olivia Rodrigo is probably the best example. There was a little bit of discourse when she was breaking about, oh, like rock and roll has kind of disappeared from the charts so much. Is Olivia Rodrigo part of like bringing rock back? All of that died really quickly. Like I just don't think that that conversation sort of pervaded. No one had the same discussions. There just wasn't this automatic feeling of this girl is standing on a stage with an electric guitar with kind of a punky outfit on.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, there are certain things that she's allowed to do and certain things that she isn't. So I do think that, sorry, I'm responding to like nine different pieces of your question that are all interesting to me at
No.
once. But like I do, to the point of how much it's changed, I really do think that it's changed a lot.
Your analysis of Avril was so interesting because she's not a person I think about a lot, mostly because I thought she died. I'm kidding. But like okay, first of all, I didn't realize that the Brazilian website that said she died and now is a doppelganger named Melissa was like a celebrity death hoax style bit. I didn't know it was like I thought it was like some
It was
weirdo
like a
who like
social
believed
experiment.
it.
No, no.
Oh my God, that's wild. And it is weird. It's so crazy that Avril's stuck.
Yeah.
But
And
like
because there
Katy
were
Perry
others,
as
there were
Jean
there was
Benet, I don't feel like permeated that badly.
well, and they did even the same blog that was intended as a social experiment to see if people would buy it. They had one for Paul McCartney, I think, and
Selena
somebody else,
Gomez.
Selena Gomez, and they really didn't stick. And I think, look, I think this is, I sort of make this in the chapter as an analogy. And there's 5% of me that's like, no, this really is why. I don't know that it's much more than five. There's this idea that was really present around her that she'd turned out to be a fraud in some way.
Mm,
Like that there was a big lie at the center of Avril Lavigne somewhere. And I do
yeah.
wonder if just a kernel of that made it more likely for hers to be the one that stuck around because again,
Yeah. Do we
nobody
even know
ever
her? Yeah.
right and like Britney Spears was never going to suffer from people being like, "Oh, she didn't write her songs."
Hmm.
Because no one associated, and this isn't right either, right? Like there are a lot of pop stars who are super involved in writing their songs, but nobody associated what she was doing with the type of thing that is like deep or serious enough
Right.
to have authorial intent in that way. And then Avril Lavigne, who's basically doing the same thing by virtue of the fact that she is standing next to a guitar on a stage, people have this completely different set of assumptions. There is a kernel of me that wonders if because so much of her narrative was about like lying and not being authentic, that it somehow carried over into the death hoax.
I thought that whole chapter was like very astute and like something I don't hear about a lot in talking about aughts pop music that also really nicely framed the Ashlee Simpson era. Because, well, one thing I noticed because when I did a podcast a while ago about The Simpsons, Ashlee has like songwriting credits on all of her music, whereas like Jessica does not. And I always thought that was kind of interesting given how she was kind of a laughing stock because of lip syncing, but it does seem like she took her artistry like semi seriously.
I do think that in those cases, like the Avrils and the Ashlee Simpsons, there was this idea that if we're going to market them as like kind of pop punk rocker chicks, we have to make it look like they wrote
Oh,
wrote their songs.
you're that's so oh, I get okay. So you're saying there's more of an incentive to be in the room, switch the word take off all your stupid clothes to preppy clothes. You're a co-writer, and it
Yeah.
feeds into the narrative that you're more authentic and musically inclined.
Yeah, and it's why in the
Oh.
album art and stuff like that, they'd make it look like there's hand scribbled notes and it's
Mm.
the notebook that you're writing your little lyrics to yourself in school for, because it's just this idea that if those are the signifiers that you're using, you kind of have to back it up. Otherwise, you're going to be tagged as phony. Funny thing about Ashlee, I mean, the Simpsons, like to me, the real like Rosetta Stone who comes up in a different chapter, but for like everything in our world now is Paris Hilton. But The Simpsons are a little bit like that in that
Yeah.
they were just so early on so many things like reality television, on the idea that people would just watch famous people existing at home
Mm-hmm.
if they were compelling enough to watch do that, and that could be kind of what your role within the entertainment industry is. You didn't have to do anything else. It was really, in an odd way, very prescient. And so, at least to my understanding, and I will say very clearly, Ashlee Simpson, that first album, Autobiography, I think is incredible. I think it is so good.
She's in Vegas in August. I mean, it is music that, like to your point, your anecdote about your that party, people still know by heart, scream at the top of their lungs. It was a good album. It's memorable, and she's still performing it. Like that's incredible relative to how she was treated at the time.
Totally. I so I say that as a disclaimer. My understanding is that Ashlee Simpson like was interested in making music, but just was interested in being in entertainment. And that they
Okay,
were all doing, or there was some DJing at one point. Like these were sort of vessels to advance the overall project of being a member of the Simpson family. So I don't know that she was like truly, truly passionate
interesting.
about music, but it's still an incredible album.
Yeah, you think you know me. Word on the street is that you do. I'm like, I maybe she was just this prodigy behind the scenes and totally misunderstood. But no, I love that album too. And like she's one of the first people I saw in concert was Ashlee. And I look back on the
Wow.
SNL thing now and I don't even feel like we have lip syncing conversations anymore because it's pretty established that even the best vocalists that we know are very good vocalists. Just they have backtracks to like enhance the overall vibe of the performance. Like it's not that serious, and it's kind of crazy to think what that did back then and how that, to your point, plays into the authenticity thing of people were just like not having it, especially when people like her. Like if you had any ammo to prove they were fake, it was the end.
Like that SNL performance became such a big deal. And this is what I spent a lot of time writing about in the chapter about her, is that it genuinely became like a watershed moment in music criticism, but also how that trickles out into how people perceive popular music in general, which is that after that album comes out, like there had been these ideas just kind of in the ether about how people were talking about pop artists sort of the wrong way. And there was this
Hmm.
idea that rock and roll is serious music and is the standard that we judge everything else by. And you obviously run into a lot of trouble with that because not all music has the same objectives. The idea of authenticity, I don't want to say it's a meaningless word. I think it was used as a cudgel against pop stars and particularly a lot of women because
Yeah.
a lot of pop music is not trying to be authentic if we think of authenticity as meaning attempting to communicate in a way that is sort of like straight up and one to one. I feel this, so I'm saying this. I also think, by the way, that a lot of the artists who people were talking about as being super, super authentic, they are putting on just as much of a performance as Britney Spears was. I
Right.
mean,
That's the
in
job.
particular, right. And like
Like,
those, look, I think that there was an idea with grunge, particularly because so many of those most venerated stars of that era, like Kurt Cobain, really, really struggled emotionally. And, in the case of Cobain, ended up taking his own life. That it, in a way that was probably pretty unhealthy, became associated with we know that there are really serious, like deep feelings that are being kind of put out into the world via catharsis through this music. But in a lot of other cases, the affect of being a rock star is just as much of an affect as being a pop star. So uh, there is this idea that holding pop to the standards of rock is not helpful, is not quite, doing criticism any favors in general. The Ashlee Simpson thing happens. There's this like major, major, major piece of writing that appears in the New York Times about this exact idea, and it kind of ends up coining the phrase poptimism of pop music should be taken as seriously as any other type of music. And genuinely, like it took a few years before that really sank in. But Ashlee Simpson was the catalyst for that piece of writing. And within like 5 or so years after that publishes, it has completely transformed the landscape of modern music criticism. Like it has completely shifted how artists like Katy Perry and Lady Gaga and like especially that wave because it had just had enough time to sink in how all of those artists were perceived. And so Katy Perry can shoot whipped cream out of her nipples and people read it as campy
camp. Yeah.
or intentional in some way, like part of the project of being Katy Perry, in a way where I think 5 years, 7 years before that, it probably reads as Katy Perry's looking for attention and she's like using her body to get it in a way that would have just been much more misogynistic and also just less accurate in terms of what she was actually doing. So it just will tickle me forever that there was this piece of like groundbreaking music analysis that really changed so much. And maybe there would have been something else that would have happened, but it was Ashlee Simpson's failed SNL performance that made it happen.
I thought that was such a brilliant connection you made to poptimism and like a really fascinating like silver lining of like something that was like so deeply unfair toward one person that ended up really, yeah, bringing about healthy changes. And I wonder if Ashlee Simpson even knows that. You should interview her when she's doing her shows and like talk to her about this because it really is important. And like there was a huge shift, and it allowed people. I mean, like Lady Gaga too, I think is an example of a person that very clearly, like her art was the development of a persona that is inherently and overtly inauthentic, and like people
Right.
just accepted that more. I think her career being a casualty is a bummer, but you've enlightened me in terms of maybe it was never her dream in the first place, which I always thought it was.
I'm sure she wanted it. Like I'm sure if it had gone great and she'd made 6 albums that are as beloved as that first one, she would have been thrilled about it. I don't know. She seems like she's doing fine.
This is like a very like a Jessica Simpson aside that I can't find an answer for, but uh, can you in your expertise explain or identify like what exactly happened when like I swear Jessica Simpson went from having a beautiful, clear live singing voice to like the Jewel you were meant for me yodel choke ad lib era. And we never returned. And I'm like, what? When did do you don't you remember her like belting beautifully and then
Yeah.
it like changed and it never went back? I'm like, what happened?
I don't know the answer to that. That is a really good question. I do not know the answer to that. I have never been as partial to, even though she has a does have a remarkably strong, beautiful singing voice. I've always been more of an Ashlee girl than a Jessica girl, so I'm not quite as enlightened on this topic, but it would be
You
worth
listen to I
further
Want to Love You
investigation.
Forever. She is belting. I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean, she was such like, not antagonist, but she was the foil to Ashlee because she was just such a clear, like, church crooner, sweet, that album is called Sweet
Sweet
Kisses. Like, it was
Kisses. I know
all
it's like such a
so corny.
that's so corny.
But that I think is like the thing about the thing that I think was particularly tough and meaningful to change ultimately about how the authenticity thing played against pop stars is that everybody like, because as you said, pop, but also basically everything that involves performance involves some element of persona. It's really a pretty meaningless word.
Yeah.
Like, I think there are people who in culture end up getting perceived as hypocritical in some way, and that is a really like repellent quality in general, I think, in culture. But the idea that what you get from an artist on stage or in a recording hasn't been put through some sort of process that involves manipulating it to be what you want it to be is just really not a thing that happens in art. It is performance by definition. And because it's ultimately a meaningless word, the way that people found a way to define it was defining people in relation to each other. And
Mm,
often you're talking about two
yeah.
young women. So
Like she's so real. She's
she's so
not.
real because, like, Avril Lavigne is so real because she's not like Britney Spears.
Yeah.
Oh, Avril Lavigne is doing something that might be kind of similar to how Britney Spears does it. She's a fraud. She's a phony. Also, by the way, we've gotten to this point where we have vilified two women for doing their jobs. And we also haven't really identified what's so wrong about doing something like Britney Spears in the first place. I think that kind of epiphany is what ends up coming out of the poptimist movement. Sounds so serious, but that is really what it became, at least within the world of people who pay attention to music criticism. And look, our girl Ashlee, who had that in her sister, is what made me think of this. Is like Ashlee was brunette and a little bit grungy and used those crunchy guitars. And then Jessica was sweet kisses, pink, dyed, super blonde hair, chunky highlights, of course. The thing that was effective about it is because it tended to only work when there was somebody to compare someone to.
And it's interesting to think too. I mean, this discourse was happening in the media, but also like millennial women, like anytime I crowdsource about certain things, like let's say like what your screen name was, for example. 80% of people, the joke is their screen name. I had one that was like Roxy Quicksilver Girl at some point. I lived in like a landlocked place. I'd never surfed. People, it was like soccer chica, this, that. It's like it was all stuff that people were posing as a person who liked something that was considered cool. And that was just an era where you wanted, yeah, to be taken seriously. You wanted boys to not trivialize your interests. And the instinct as a means of, you know, survival in a social context was to kind of, yeah, falsify your interests to meet that standard. And it's interesting to think of how that being done in the media at a higher level probably influenced us, and we internalized it as like, oh yeah, she's in a half pipe in Vans, like she's cool, dudes are gonna like her. Like it all kind of intertwines with the, I think, a lot of like sociological stuff that went on at the time too, where we didn't take ourselves seriously either.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And it's very funny to think about, like, I don't know. I think there was some element of the skater girl look as a reaction to the Britney butterfly clip, pink, shiny, all of that, that I think came from a place of having a different version of femininity represented in culture that wasn't quite as overtly feminine or sort of perfected. And so there's like some slice of that that I think came from, if not a good place, then at least a fair place. It's just so interesting how quickly it becomes for the male gaze in its own way, right? It's like, oh, I'm not annoying. Like, I'm low maintenance. I don't care about all of that stuff. But also, then the images of that you're seeing be rewarded for that, they're still beautiful, beautiful people, right? So it's like, it's just so much of it is a facade. And I'm sure we're all like trying to unbrainwash ourselves however many years since.
Oh, for sure. I think about this often in terms of pop music where like okay, to take it back to Max Martin and what you describe his melodic math. I knew he made bangers that sounded similar, but I didn't really like know why and how methodical it was. I want you to explain that quickly if you don't mind, but also kind of to the broader point of like I'm such a lifelong lover of easily digestible top 40 music like my whole life. And it took me a while to just like really embrace it and be okay with it. And there's something interesting when you go back and really understand more about the era and realize that pop music is by and large quite formulaic to be an earworm, to make you like it. It is engineered at a level where it's made for consumption, not from necessarily a place of artistry. It's like, what matters more, the way you receive art or the way it was made? You know what I mean? Like, is that a
Yeah.
bad thing that it was made for consumption? Like that we all love it? It's sometimes I get a little tripped up thinking about that.
Well, and I'm actually not sure that those things are certainly mutually exclusive, but even mutually at odds with each other. The
Yeah,
creation of something for consumption versus the creation of something for art. Because while there is more freedom for an artist to make whatever it is that they want to make without the need to conform to what's going to sell, ultimately very few artists succeed without some level of constraints put on them. And so the
yeah,
idea of like what can you create within the bounds of what's going to be resonant on the broadest possible levels, like
yeah,
I'm just not sure that we look back at music history and be like, the things that have succeeded on those planes have an inherently reduced form of artistry.
yeah,
And then when you add in the piece of that, which is if you are creating music in order for it to go out in the world and be received by millions and millions of people, become part of culture, to be discursive, to be supplemented by a public persona, by appearances, by, visuals, by a life lived in public that has some relationship with the work, that performance art and how that interacts with the music, to me, I think has created some of the most impactful art that we've ever seen in music. I mean, if Madonna, I think is a huge trailblazer in this, right? And that is hooky, digestible pop songs in a lot of cases, but also groundbreaking visual imagery
mm,
and politically coded provocation of the more conservative elements in culture, especially in the 80s, that did a lot to reshape how people just thought. And so the digestibility of it can be a tool as much as it can be a hindrance, I think. And that's sort of me on my soapbox as a
I love
fellow
that
pop
soapbox.
fan.
I'm taking notes. No, that's such a great way to look at it in terms of like broader cultural impact and how this work like touches so many things beyond just like the ears and the song and what it is. And it's also about what it represents. And I think the imagery piece is huge with a lot of the 90s aughts pop stars because that maybe was one of the few areas they had like a little more control, or like look what you're how you talked about Christina Aguilera from the get-go trying to like exercise more agency toward her vision, and like you see it like creep in small ways until she ultimately like got to do what she wanted to do. You said something funny like at like my version of party talk is explaining like why Mandy Moore is incredibly like underrated or like
I just think Candy's a great song. I just think that's an
Candy is a
awesome,
great
awesome
song.
song. And you had mentioned you'd asked about Max Martin and the melodic math principle, which like it's not the way that I would explain it is it's not about making songs formulaic in the way where, like Paramore is gonna call up Olivia Rodrigo and be like, "You're cribbing misery business." Like that's about chord progressions. That's about in some cases melody. That's about the sort of literal music on the page. What Max Martin is a real evangelist about is basically like the hierarchy between like music and harmonies and lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And to him, everything has to be in service of the melody. And so he will create these like really earwormy hooks, and then the entire song gets written around that. The Taylor voice notes that she used to put out with some albums are such
Yeah.
incredible texts for so many people. And like I always wonder if fans kind of realize like how much people learned about the process of pop songwriting at the major level through those voice notes, because you see the different versions of it. And she explains like sometimes you write a song to track where you get a track and you write a top line, the melody, and the lyrics over that. Sometimes in her case, you'll write what's basically a poem or lyrics and then find some music that applies to it. In the cases of Folklore and Evermore, a lot of that was getting basically like these melodic piano sketches of melody and writing words to that, and then sort of retrofitting with the beats and the harmonies and everything else within the production around that. In the case of Max, it happens melody first every single time, basically. And so if he has done that and he feels good about the hook, then if you come and you're like, "Oh, well, I wrote these lyrics that I'm really proud of, but they don't match up," he's going to be like, "You need to change these words." And it doesn't really matter what they are. Um, and and particularly because English is not his first language, and he speaks very good English, but he's Swedish. That combination is why you get some of these lines that just totally like make no sense, like the Ariana Grande, "I only want to die alive."
Now that I've become who I really are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't you use the example of Teenage Dream? Like his style's like the hit, 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 like
Yeah,
word,
that
word, word.
to understand what he wants, I do think that's the best song because it's like you make me like it every syllable is attached to a note within a melody that he just wants to drive it into your brain. It's kind of like the melody is the board and each syllable is a hammer and a nail that he's just like, I don't actually care what these words are. They're just the mechanism by which we are affixing the thing that I actually care about, which is the melody, onto you.
And you're so right about the Taylor Swift, whether it was the rep like making of videos with the iconic getaway car scene or her voice notes. She's mumble singing for the most part, and then there's a few words or a chorus, and then you fill it in with what sounds good. Yet there's like this almost legalistic or literal intensity when people analyze her lyrics. Like everything is pointed when I mean, you and I both know as writers, like it's just you're always trying to figure out what sounds good, what flows well, to say what you want to say. I'm kind of surprised at how literally sometimes we take her lyricism.
Although within the context of Max Martin, I do feel like that's part of the magic of those songs with him off of Red and then 1989 is that you did have this meeting of the evangelist about melody and hooks and the evangelist about words. because Taylor
Mm.
Swift was never gonna
Yeah.
let I Only Want to Die Alive, never by the hands of a broken heart on her
Right.
album. Like she was, which is not to say that that in the case of an Ariana Grande did her any sort of disservice, even though she didn't, she was like really mad that she had to sing it, but she got overruled and it's fine. That sounds great.
But at
But
the
I do
point
think the
Taylor
fact that
was
you
when she
have,
started working with him too gave her a bit
yeah,
more leverage in those decisions, I'm
yeah.
sure.
And so you have a song like Blank Space
Ugh.
that the words are so smart and satirical, and there's been all of this intention paid to the message and the jokes and the punchlines and all of that, that you just like is just often sort of an afterthought in a Max Martin song, but then you still have the Max Martin magic musical pixie dust. That's a pretty incredible example of two people meeting each other, both functioning at the top of their games,
Yeah.
but also with very different principles. Which is, by the
And
way, like,
yeah.
and I do say this in the book, Max is not always right. You know, like
Hello, green
he's
light.
right, exactly, which he told Lord was in quote unquote incorrect songwriting. But I do think it serves him well that like for what he does, he feels incredibly strongly about his principles. So then a Max Martin song, you just sort of always know that it's a Max Martin song.
I'm gonna listen, go to Anne Juliet with my eyes wide open this time because it's 'cause isn't that his jukebox
Yes.
musical?
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, once you pointed that out, I was like, with blank space. Nice to meet you. Where are you?
Da, da,
It's like
da.
all the songs like really like hit with each word. And you made a really interesting comparison to like Britney's first album versus like I'm a Slave for You, which was like a totally different style, totally different people working on it and explain like the different layering. And I don't know music terms well enough, but this is why Nora's book is important to read because she actually understands like music theory and can explain to you how things are
Well, it's
composed.
so much
And
more
it's
like
educational.
it's like a loosey goosey sound to make it
Yep.
not academic at all. It's just all like she's been in these sort of tight little boxes for every note, and then all of a sudden it's this like fluid canvas.
I feel like we're randomly also in a Benny Blanco renaissance where like nobody really knew or understood who he was and how many of these songs he worked on, like Teenage Dream. And then out of nowhere, he's just like, I made every song you care about. And I feel like
I,
it's
you know
random.
why I think it is? I think it's because he was such a Dr. Luke protege. And
Oh.
that became obviously an ugly topic because of Dr. Luke's history and Kesha's accusations. Because there was a moment when Dr. Luke had been kind of Max Martin's protege, and then he took off, and then Benny Blanco was a little bit of like the Dr. Luke to his Max Martin. And then I think what happened with Dr. Luke
Uh,
probably kind of got in the way of that.
there's just so many interesting tidbits that I won't spoil from like the origins of Umbrella to the Kelly Clarkson Clive Davis feud that I didn't really know a lot about. And I've had a pit in my stomach ever since I read it that My December flopped because I really wanted her to be able to tell her story on her own terms.
I know. I
And
know. I
Because
have
of You is
such
so
like,
good. And I
it
didn't know she
is
worked with
so good.
Evanescence on it.
It is so good. The problem, like, I'm so Team Kelly, and I think it seems incredibly obvious from many, many accounts, not just her own, that Clive Davis and people at her label were just like really rude and condescending to her. I think the American Idol of it all had a much longer tail than maybe even she realized in the moment, but that certainly that we realized in the moment, where I think people just sort of always thought that they could talk down to her because she had come out of
Yeah.
American Idol, which people looked at as being obviously a huge property, but maybe a little bit corny.
Yeah.
It is,
I
I'm
read,
always like,
yeah.
Since You've Been Gone is like just one of the best songs ever.
I don't
And
get
I'm
sick of
always
it
like,
either.
Kelly, I just want you to like this song so much because it's such a good song. But
I know, I know. It's always hard when you get that sense. And that is something that some artists do better than others is conceal their resentment toward the thing that they're most famous for. It is a fantastic song. The origin with the song Maps, I'm like, what? I,
it's crazy.
I read recently that American Idol artists account for like 2.1 or 2.5% of all music sales of all time. Isn't that interesting?
That is, that's wild.
It's on Wikipedia's
Yeah,
American Idol page, which is just a place I like to peruse.
sure.
I feel like the last thing I need to ask you though probably is like, what would be the ultimate pop song to you that like encapsulates the entire decade's impact on pop culture? Like, what would it be and why in terms of like the 2000s?
Maybe it is actually Teenage Dream.
Yeah.
You can fit a lot into that song in the sense that, okay, if you don't have the Britney breakout at the beginning of the decade, Max is probably not in the same place. You don't have the Dr. Luke element. Like that production team is not working on that song in the way that they're working on it. I think also if you don't have the kind of poptimism debate break out largely as a result of Ashlee Simpson and I think indirectly Avril Lavigne,
Yeah.
we probably don't have the same attitude towards a pop song that sounds like that comes out at the end of the 2000s. I also just think that the kind of it has that identity of a song where its most like pop confection and kind of disposable seeming elements are the things that actually make it transcendent. It's a really hard question. Like I wish that I could choose
I
10.
know it's like impossible, but
But that's you could do a lot worse than Teenage Dream.
I know
Also, I feel like Katy
it's
Perry maybe
so
like
good.
needs a bit of a win, so
Teenage Dream is it's too good for its own good. It almost is like such a hard bar to compete against when
yes.
you come out with
Yeah.
a song that good. Actually, lastly, what song are you excited to have permission to listen to not Taylor's version of again? For me, it's Holy Ground.
Yeah. It's either so the two for me that are huge are We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, just without those like really psychotic sounding wee parts. But then the other one is Forever and Always, which is one of my all-time faves. I'm
Oh,
just like,
interesting.
I just really felt in the re-recording that I could hear that she doesn't hate Joe Jonas anymore. And to me, that
Hmm.
was to the detriment of the song. So those are big for
Losing the
me.
voice cracks on any of the songs is tough. They're so important. They really add to it.
I also just like to me the fact that she was a petulant teenager is a feature, not a bug.
Yep.
And so I'm really grateful.
Do you have a favorite vault track?
Do I have a favorite vault track? So I was listening to I Bet You Think About Me the other day, and I have to say that
Hmm.
that has always loomed pretty large for me. I do, I really, nothing new on tour with Phoebe Bridgers did make me cry. I never would have
Hmm.
given you that as my answer before the Eras tour, but now that song is pretty important to me. The Red Vault track, I have a lot of appreciation for, I would say in general.
Both such good ones. I know it's kind of also hard to pick, but like I literally can't get over. I think it had to be the only reason was like thematically was is it over now is one of my top five favorite Taylor Swift songs of all time. And I also think that Diane Warren's Say Don't Go is like outstanding. And
Yeah, that's
I can't believe those didn't make the cut. And I think Say Don't Go in general isn't getting enough airtime now, but is a really, really strong song.
also what's the one from Speak Now that got the Taylor Lautner music
Oh God,
video
Mr.
that sounds like
Perfectly
Maroon
Fine.
5?
Oh no, no,
No,
no.
no, no, no. 5. It's like supposed to be a sexy time song, but she was a child, so it doesn't really sound like that.
I hate that I
Uh
can't remember it. But yeah, it did get its own music
it
video. I
has a
forgot
lot of
about that.
words in the title.
It does.
Hold on, I'm Googling this.
Yeah, we have to get it. People are screaming at us.
It's like it's not called, oh my God. It's not called I'm gonna get you, but it's something like that. I can see you. I can see you. I can
I can
see
see.
you. I love I can see you. I think that's a total bop.
I can see you is really good. But like it is a funny thing where some of the vault tracks have these titles that are almost like generic phrases that are hard to remember. Like, is it over now? Now that we don't talk, say don't go. It's like a lot of short words, almost like how confusing The Last of Us, it ends with us, this is us. It's like
Yeah,
short.
it's yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, they all get really convoluted. And Taylor Swift's like recent vault songs like really trip me up. But anyway, Nora, you're the best. I kept you on way too long, selfishly, but everyone go buy Nora's book. I've like literally pages and pages of notes. This was such a great read. It really made such strong connections between our coming of age upbringing, the culture we knew, how music informed it, and a lot about just how women have been treated in the media and the kind of positive evolution we've seen over time and who really drove that. And yeah, I think you framed all of this in a really interesting way, and I absolutely loved it. It's so good. It comes out Tuesday, June 17th.
Correct.
And listen to Nora's podcast on Spotify, every single album. And where else can people find you?
On Instagram at Nora Princiotti. The book is available anywhere you buy books, but also if you go to my Instagram, all of the relevant links to order are there. If people listen to this in time, if you're in DC, I will be at the LaFleur in Georgetown for a really fun event on Tuesday, June 24th, and would love to see anyone who's around and wants to come talk about the pop girlies with me.
All right, take care. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Kate.
Bye. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Follow me at Kate Kennedy. Rate and review 5 stars. It makes such a difference. And if you want to share with a friend, that'd be chill. No pressure. Come back next week. Subscribe to Be There in 5, wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for the privilege of your time. As always, let me know your thoughts and I'll let you know mine. I'll be there in 5, I swear.